Alrighty. Okay, I'm sorry to shut you all guys up, but we're running out of time and I gotta be quick. My name is Gray McCormick. I'm a local concept artist and illustrator. I'm very much a young artist. I'm very much new on the block. Simon was talking about sort of period where you're basically not getting any sleep and just working all the time just to improve yourself. I am in the throes of that, and I'm enjoying it immensely. You seemed a bit down about it, but I'm pretty pumped on it. You liked it? Yeah. See, I'm afraid that it might be the most fun I'm ever going to have doing this, because you're learning so much. Anyways, so I'm here to talk about a little bit of what Simon talked about, but more just about process and creating unique characters and illustrations, focusing mostly on costume design for characters. I am a illustrator and character designer. That's sort of my quote-unquote major in doing this, and it's what I focus on greatly. One of my favorite things to do is research for a project, which I will cover here a little bit as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a little bit of process with a little bit of theory, and hopefully, and we're also going to talk a little bit about reference gathering as well, which I hope you guys get something out of. So I created a character for this presentation specifically just to kind of flex my costume muscle a little bit. I really love historical costume. It's one of my favorite things to do. Costume design, sort of using the basis of costume design theory as it is in theater, is a really good place to start when we're talking about costume design. We're establishing two things. We're supporting a theme, which is the overarching sort of atmosphere of the play or the movie or the comic, and we're also establishing the nature of the character. So we're talking about their race, their gender, their age. We're reflecting their changes throughout the story. Perhaps in the beginning of the story they start clean, at the end of the story they end ragged. We're contrasting them against their environment. We're contrasting them against other characters, and we're also supporting the interpretation of the theme as seen through the director and the playwright, or the writer, or whatever. All these names are interchangeable, whether you're working with a comic in movies or comic design or whatnot. And I'll get into some of the limitations of sort of costume concept design in a little bit. And again, I'm going to try to be quick. So one of the ways I start off designing a costume, or a character really, is kind of one of two ways. Let me just find my thumbs here. Simon had really great examples of thumbs. I like to start off with thumbs as well. It's a great way to loosen up. This is for a different character that I did. It was for, actually I can't remember what it was for, but it's a Treyu. I was redesigning a Treyu. And just getting the shapes out there. Just putting the shapes on the page and playing with them, and using reference to sort of generate inspiring ideas and whatnot, and just really playing with the ways in which the costumes kind of sit on the body and whatnot. Quick question: are you guys mostly students, or what's? I know there's a couple of professionals in the room, but what are you guys mostly? Fresh grads, new grads. Okay. So I'm not gonna I just don't want to tell you anything that you already know. That's the kind of thing. That's kind of what I gauged you guys as. Okay. Another way I might start a costume is I start with a very firm idea in my head of kind of what I want to go with. Okay. In this case, I wanted to kind of create. Don't laugh. Red Riding Hood in space. Very simple, but just something that I could really kind of launch from. And after doing my initial reference gathering, I decided kind of on a style that was based in Turkish style clothing. Now this is kind of how, okay, so this is where I'm going to talk about the importance of reference gathering. You just graduated. Your teachers have probably mentioned a couple times that reference gathering is good. They probably undersold how smart you can be about reference gathering. It's not about Google image searching. If that's all you're doing, you're not doing it right. This is your opportunity to really understand and grow your visual vocabulary when designing anything, whether it's an environment, a character, or a vehicle. This is what it's about. It's about making you a better artist in the long run. So use this time wisely to not just type in white skirt and then just take whatever you can find. Be smart about it. So what I wanted to start with is I started with one of the classic books you guys have probably all seen is the history of costume, or what is it called? Historical costume design or whatever. I can't remember. It's that big, massive tome Taschen puts out. And I really just kind of loved the way this big white skirt looked. So I kind of just started with that. And through my research, I discovered that this style of clothing was called, I'm going to screw up the pronunciation, but it's called Turquerie, which is an 16th to 18th century style of clothing that was very popular amongst Europeans. I wouldn't have known that had I just done a Google image search. So knowing that, I can able to implement those search terms into Google and start getting better search results, finding more precise images and forming a sharper idea of what I want to create. And from there, I can move outwards. I start to think, okay, Red Riding Hood space. I'll grab something from Prometheus. And you know what? That armor kind of looks insect-like. So I might grab some insects as well, kind of draw that into my inspirational process when I'm rendering out the final materials. Another, which is also a keyword, finding materials. What are they wearing? Silk, cotton, linen. What do those look like? I looked at this is a Sargent painting. Sargent did absolutely incredible portraits of people wearing the most opulent clothing. So how did they represent that? How can I draw that into my inspiration? So when you're designing any character, when you're designing any costume, good, smart reference gathering is absolutely key. Like, I cannot stress it enough. I will spend 3 to 4 hours just searching alone, and I won't even start drawing yet. Because I don't even like, when I'm designing a character where I have like kind of a firm idea in my mind, I don't like drawing if I don't have anything to go off of. So once I kind of do that, and I kind of get a good sense of where I'm going to go, I can start putting in the pieces. Now, I might iterate a little bit on this, but because I liked this design so much, I chose specific parts to just iterate on. I wanted to kind of explore her helmet a little bit. Kind of decide what shapes I wanted to use, you know, like how I was going to get across kind of the sort of cowl-hooded space helmet that I wanted her to have. Also did some color comps and whatnot. So this was important to sort of still maintain the exploration process. One thing I was going to say, just about one last thing about reference gathering that I can't stress enough, is that it's really easy to reference gathering as well. And when it comes to costume design, you really have to focus on how it's going to function. How does cloth sit on the body? What's the difference between silk and heavy cotton? One is going to weigh more than the other. Okay? One is going to have different folds and different effects on the body, and the body's going to have different effects on it. So again, do your research. Absolutely. So when we get kind of back to the actually, you know what? I'll go through just a little bit of process as well. So where is my? Hold on. Let me just find myself here. Here we go. So this is another character that I did. This was based. My favorite genre is historical fiction. I love getting crazy with like historical periods and whatnot. This is ancient Persia, which was really fun. And I was lucky enough to actually create a piece that that was kind of well organized in its layer process. So you can kind of see how, you're going to kind of see how I create this character. Let me just sort of reverse engineer it here for a second. Where's my pen? There we go. This is quicker. So again, I would start with the same process of reference gathering and thumbnails and whatnot. Anyway, I don't really have any good process for this guy, but so it's just kind of like, there was no point in bringing him. You know, I start with a very limited palette. 5 colors to be exact, actually. I start with a basic pose, kind of how I want to sort of frame him out. I change my mind completely, and then I start blocking things in. And now I'm kind of getting a sense, okay, like his stance, where the major source of light is coming from, where's kind of going to sort of be the darker areas in the picture, yada yada yada. And then from here, what's up? Oh. Actually, specifically the reason why I made this pose change is because I was looking through my old work and I realized I had a character in the exact same pose. And maybe that's good to mention, like maybe it's good to, like, before you do anything, to kind of get a sense of where you're at and what you've done already, just so you're not making the same mistakes. Like, so Simon, again, was talking about life drawing. Life drawing is hugely important. It's incredibly important. And I'm very lazy about life drawing, and I try to get out there as much as I can. And the reason why it's important is you will begin to get comfortable drawing an arm or a leg the same way you've always drawn it. This is like this is how you never get famous. That's how you never get successful, is constantly looking for good reference, constantly doing life drawing, constantly challenging yourself on how you understand, for instance, the human form, is how you're going to get good, not how you're going to get comfortable and just doing the same thing over and over again. So, long-winded answer, yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. Yeah. And it's worth it, and it's worth it just to that end, to pose your characters in a pose you've never done before, or that you find completely challenging, because it forces you to A, fuck up, excuse me, to A, screw up, and learn from it, and fail a little bit, and move on, and B, learn something new that's going to help you down the line. Anyways, long-winded answer to both of your questions. So anyways, I completely changed the pose. I thought something a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more coy, perhaps. I don't really know. I didn't really think of him as a sexual being. But then I start blocking in. So like once I kind of had the figure and the light source, I can start blocking in costume elements. And I'm only using 5 colors. I start with a very limited color palette. I add basic colors beyond that. So I have a palette in Photoshop. I don't have it here, unfortunately. It's cobalt blue, sienna, a burnt sienna, stuff like that. Those basic colors that I add and subtract from my color mixtures. Yes? I do. You like black and white and then paint over it? Yeah, yeah. Or like start with that base. I used to, but I just found, unfortunately, that every time I started to apply color, it just got muddy. So what I did, and I couldn't start a painting with just using the entire color wheel either, because that was just chaotic. So I found this like really happy medium where I chose like I go to a good site to know is cooler.adobe.com. I go there, I become very deliberate and very specific about the colors that I want to use. I'm drawing from my reference. I'm doing little color comp, like we're talking 10 pixel by 10 pixel thumbnails, and trying to get kind of cool, interesting little color things, just like experimenting and then drawing from that. And then again, just really, really specific 5 colors to start. Boom, that's it. And then I just start to get, I'm just more comfortable and more, it just seems more manageable that way. And then I can kind of push and pull the temperatures from there. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and it's almost like working monochromatically. Like you can see here at the bottom where I started. Where's my guy here? Like, this is very monochromatic. You know, I'm using almost 2 colors at this point, but I'm just establishing value and composition. And then beyond that, I'm just adding more colors. So I'm trying to keep it simple, as simple as I can to start, and make it more complicated as I go, rather than just jumping in the deep end with like weights around my feet. Anyway, so continuing to add, block in costume elements, refine some more. I've changed the design of his helmet. Seems a little bit more creepy. Yep. Starting to add just little elements here. Okay, axes, sweet, more axes, super sweet. Okay, and then at this point I'm like, I can see the end. Like I've gotten to this point and I'm like, all right, I know what this image is going to look like, and now I'm just going to start refining. So now I've blocked in some background elements to further push the narrative. This is honestly my favorite thing to do. Pose a character in a small environment and just have them sit there. Like, if I could do that for the rest of my life, I'm happy. It's gravy for the rest of time. And then I'm just like I said, just fleshing out more of his environment. Adding stuff. I don't have anything too much to say. Pushing and pulling values is really important at this stage as well, because you kind of step back from your image, and I wish the quality was a little bit better, but I started to feel that the background was a bit too light behind him, so I started to kind of fill in darker values around there, push the form of his body up against the wall. Again, more details, more details. Yeah. Well, like I'm just. Yeah. And then the background isn't necessarily as important, but I want it to kind of sell the idea that he's somewhere relevant, right? And so I kind of just block it in, but really I'm just trying to push the focus to him and kind of his face. Yes. Oh, time? Five more minutes? Okay, well that's good because we're almost done. And then just final adjustment layers after the end. Use Photoshop. Don't let your ego go a little bit. Don't worry about the fact that it's not perfect. Just, we're here to make a good image here, so don't worry about that. So that's kind of the process of creating that image. And then with this lady that you just saw from here, this is the work in progress that I have, that I created for this. And this is just me pushing the Red Riding Hood in space thing, where I blocked in her little basket robo gingham thing at the end just to kind of, I thought it was cool. So I just blocked that in real quick. But I'm really focusing a lot on, let's see if I could zoom in here. Hold up. Oh yeah, let's move around here for a sec. I'm focusing on the material of her dress, the material of her cloak, trying to get these folds right. You can see the difference between these folds and these folds. We can imagine that this cloak is a much thicker material than this skirt, right? So that's one good way to thinking about it. This is obviously a different material than this and whatnot. Thinking about like specular reflections and okay, this is metal, so like what's happening there? We're going to pick up a lot of light around it, etc., etc. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at, and this is a work in progress. So I'm probably going to finish up in the next week because it's driving me crazy. And that's kind of the basic understanding of how I work. The one last thing I wanted to say about sort of costume design theory is that I design. This is a personal project, so I'm designing for my own stupid entertainment. Like I just want to design a cool character. I'm not necessarily, but if I was going to put it somewhere, this would be like a movie. This is a movie for me because each medium has a limitation. If you're designing for comics, you don't want to design this character because you have to draw this character 1,000 times for the rest of your life probably, and you don't want to do that. Comics are limited to static images, often black and white, often very limited color palette. So you have to design with that in mind. Theater, designing for theater, you're viewing the character from a fixed distance and angle. So the detail and the close-up understanding of your character is not necessarily important. They have to be clearly read, so it's important to have a simple design. Movies, we're getting in close and we're coming out far. Lots of different kinds of shots. It has to be based in reality, but not really. You can design a costume that has real elements and CG elements, so that's something to consider. Video games, you're limited by a budget of polygons or processing, so that's something that you have to consider as well. So all these different limitations of character costume design come into play when you're designing for a specific medium. So that's really important to take into consideration when you're designing. Like, you can't have floaty things around some dude's head in a theater. You can't do that. You can't do that in a play. Conversely, like I have no idea why they ever designed, like Iron Man is an insane design for a comic book. That's so much drawing in that, and they did it. So, but like again, things to consider. I think that's it. I think the only thing I have to say last, which is kind of a non sequitur at this point, is tropes. Being aware of design tropes kind of ties in with reference gathering as well. You'll notice that there's no belt buckles on her. Belt buckles are the fantasy equivalent to blue glowy bits in sci-fi. You don't want to stay away from tropes. Tropes are an identifying mark. She has a space helmet on. She's in space. These are identifying tropes that help establish a character in a world that is already familiar to us. But you don't want to push it to the point where you're just relying on the tropes to help sell the character. Belt buckles on a fantasy character and big shoulder pads, okay, he's a tank. He's just a big warrior dude, big shoulder pads, we get it. Like, there is a point where using those tropes and sort of using, again, your established or perhaps infant visual vocabulary will hurt you because you will not be creating anything new. You won't be creating anything interesting. Yeah, and that's about it. That's all I got. Thanks, guys.